FPS games are a dime a dozen, and it's not that often that a memorable one comes along. They come in all levels of intensity. On one end, you have casual shooters like Call of Duty or Battlefield, and on the other end, you have competitive games like Counter-Strike or Valorant. And then there's the hardcore shooters, games like Insurgency, Squad, and of course, Escape from Tarkov. Tarkov is a pretty unique experience, or at least it was. Before games like Arena Breakout and Delta Force began copying its formula, Tarkov pioneered the extraction shooter genre. It pushed the ideas of hardcore and immersive further than pretty much any FPS before it. And yet, if you ask people who play Tarkov what they think about it, you'll hear something strange. They'll tell you it's one of the most unique games ever made. They'll tell you it gives you feelings that no other game can replicate. And then they'll tell you that they probably hate it. Tarkov has orbital highs, some of the most intense moments you can experience in a multiplayer game, but it also has unbelievably low lows. So how can that be the case? How can a game that's so detailed, so ambitious, and so beloved also be something that its own players resent? And for me, I think the answer is that Tarkov has a birth defect. Not a bug, not just bad development decisions along the way. I think there are design flaws that exist at the very foundation of the game. In my opinion, there's actually two Tarkovs. There's Tarkov the idea, the version you imagine when you watch trailers, the version you feel during those perfect raids where everything clicks, when you work well with your squad, clearing hallways and walking through the map with them, when you extract with a full backpack, a rare quest item, and a story worth telling. And then there's Tarkov the reality, the actual game. A static set of maps, predictable spawn points, repetitive and frankly painful quests, and a gameplay loop that slowly transforms the experience from a tactical sandbox into something much more rigid. And this dissonance is where Tarkov's biggest problem lives. Because due to Tarkov's birth defect, its flawed foundation, there's certain problems that simply won't be fixed, ever. And I don't think it's Battlestate Games' fault for wanting the game to be bigger, better. But I do dislike how they act like they can do more with it than they've ever actually been able to in reality. I don't like the false promises and the half-fleshed out ideas. I want Tarkov to live up to its potential as much as anybody, but there's just an issue. Because Tarkov's a revolutionary game, but it's also inherently flawed. Every time you load into a Tarkov raid, you're actually just entering the same environment. The same maps, the same loot locations, the same spawn points, the same hotspots. There's a little variation, but the patterns are impossible to ignore. Eventually, players learn exactly where the other players can spawn. They learn the optimal routes to high-value loot. They learn where fights are likely to happen and where people like to camp. What starts as a chaotic survival experience slowly becomes something else entirely. It turns into a sort of memorization game. Instead of getting sucked into this hardcore and immersive battlefield, experienced players are just running through pre-solved scenarios. They know the spawn next to them, they know which angles to hold, they know which quest locations other players will rush. Every raid becomes a kind of chess match. Players make a sequence of moves based on memorized patterns, and whoever understands these patterns better has a huge advantage. Not an unbeatable one, but a huge one. Because what do you do when someone knows the spawns better than you, and they shoot you before you can even react? What do you do when someone gets a better spawn than you, and they can get to the high-value loot before you even ever have a chance? Just extract and run it back, I guess. Yeah, fun. This is reinforced by Tarkov's progression system. The players who complete quests faster unlock better gear earlier. The best players get ahead, and they stay ahead. And this is a little bit lessened by the fact that there's a permanent character now, but they're going right back into having a seasonal character, so it's going to be an issue again. Because you can bet that they're going to put incentives to play the seasonal character. Because they need incentives for gameplay so the streamers hop on and give the game publicity. Because Tarkov players mostly go through the same life cycle. The learning phase, the experienced phase, and then the I'm sick of it so I'm retiring phase. So they constantly have to be sucking in new players. New content for the streamers and the all-day players to grind for that most people will never even get a chance to see or use or obtain. Because it's so difficult or so time-consuming that it inevitably just starts to feel like a full-time job just to even participate in the game. When all is said and done, it seems like the streamers have finished all the content and grinded it, and the normal players have gotten sick of it and just given up because it's not worth it. Because the developers didn't give them enough time to even do it unless they're sitting at their computer 24/7. And as soon as they're done, those streamers go and play other games because it seems like they'd rather be playing anything else. And you realize you're no longer playing that hardcore survival shooter that you thought you bought. You're playing actual Tarkov. A highly competitive and repetitive game of map knowledge, spawn prediction, and mechanical exploits. Some players learn to love this version of Tarkov, and some learn to hate it. Many do both. But this is the moment when the identity crisis of the game becomes obvious. Tarkov touts itself as being this dynamic tactical sandbox, but its structure forces it to become a solved puzzle, one that people try to solve with gameplay techniques that just aren't fun. And yeah, extract camping is one of those. And so is popping an SJ6 and a Trimadol and running straight to the closest room that has a LEDX because you got the good spawn. And it doesn't matter how many times you change the spawns or add more extracts or change where the loot is, because people are just going to learn that too. They're going to learn ways to exploit it, ways to make it not fun. And it's not because they're not updating the game. They try, and they sometimes make good changes. It's because the base structure of the game doesn't allow it to work properly and be balanced and fun consistently. So no matter what changes BSG makes, Tarkov turns into this painfully mastered repetition. This survival extraction game, cosplaying as a competitive shooter, cosplaying as a story game. This broken loop. Another reason Tarkov is so frustrating to evaluate is that the game hides almost everything from the player. You rarely understand why you died. There's no kill cams in this game, no match replays, very little explanation of how mechanics even work. Players have spent years data mining the game to figure out ballistics, armor penetration, fragmentation, and dozens of other hidden systems. But none of this information is presented clearly inside the game itself. I do like the fact that they added the feature where you can see what armor your ammo will penetrate. I think that's a good change. Transparency is good, and the information about the game should be in the game, not in some external wiki you have to go search up. I mean, seriously, what the is the handbook even for if you have to go to the wiki to learn everything about the game, to figure out the quests, how the guns work, how the ammo works? You have a handbook in the game, but you make this external website to learn everything about the game, which then makes everything in the game feel pointless. But back to my earlier point, every death in Tarkov exists in this strange fog of uncertainty. Did you get outplayed? Did the AI behave strangely and glitch out and manage to one-tap you in the head with some crazy 180 flying headshot? Was there a bug? Or was the other player cheating? This isn't a video about cheating, but we all know the Tarkov issue with cheaters, and the game's always struggled with it, and the lack of transparency only amplifies the suspicion. Even basic features that other games solved decades ago, like replay systems, still don't exist here. Back in 2010, Call of Duty Black Ops had a full theater mode, where you could review entire matches and spectate any player throughout the whole match. In 2026, Tarkov still can't do that. Do I think it's because they can't implement it or they don't want to? I'm not sure. I think maybe the framework of the game literally wouldn't hold up and they don't know how to install that feature. Or maybe they don't want people learning the secret mechanics of the game and seeing just how janky they actually are. Because when a game hides so much of its inner workings, you start to assume the worst. Not necessarily because the developers are dishonest, but because the system just feels fragile. Performance issues, inconsistent AI, mechanics that behave unpredictably. I mean, what are we supposed to think? Sometimes Tarkov feels like this attempted massive AAA game built on top of an early prototype that was never meant to carry that much weight. Like trying to build a steel skyscraper on a framework of toothpicks. And so all the issues of Tarkov, cheaters, bugs, janky mechanics, you can never actually call BSG out on them completely because they're all shrouded in this complete veil of mystery. And I think that's on purpose. I think there's a reason we haven't gotten a theater mode. I think there's a reason we don't see the replays and we don't understand the ballistics. And I think it's because under that mystery, there's a game system that doesn't justify the hours and hours that people pour into this game, learning every mechanic and trying to become good at it. Trying to get to the point where they can finally say that they've mastered and they fully understand this buggy mess. But I think the only thing keeping this house of cards standing is the fact that BSG won't let us see behind the curtain. This mystery. Despite the things that I mentioned before, Tarkov remains incredibly addictive. That's because every raid is a gamble. You bring gear worth hundreds of thousands of rubles, the equivalent of tens of hours you've spent playing the game. You hunt rare quest items and hope not to die with them. You invest time, preparation, and focus into every run, and the entire thing can disappear in a single moment. And this gets you invested, but the game so often disrespects that investment. Every raid becomes a pull on a slot machine. Losses blurred together, but the wins feel incredible. Extracting after a brutal fight, escaping with valuable loot, finishing a quest that took days to complete, those moments hit your brain with this massive dopamine rush. And that's why people keep coming back. But it's not a good high. Like gambling isn't a good high. Tarkov feels like you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the raid where a bug or a cheater ruins your day. For that roulette spin where you put all your money on red and it came up black. Eventually, over time, something happens. The players who stick with Tarkov for years often stop enjoying it. Yeah, sure, they still get a thrill out of the awesome moments that they can clip where they got 4 kills in a matter of 30 seconds, but most longtime players just seem exhausted by the game, frustrated with its problems, and resentful of its wasted potential. And like a gambling addict at the casino, both the wins and the losses feel like an inevitability, and these players just become a slave to them. They don't even care at this point. They're just playing because they're playing, and they've always played. And they know they'll have good days where they win, and they'll have bad days where they lose. But what happens with most gambling addicts? Do they mostly win, or do they mostly lose? And so what do you see in Tarkov nowadays? The most common way people seem to enjoy the game is by laughing at it, sharing jokes about the bugs and the hopeless development, ignoring the quests and just doing dumb raids with friends where they mess around, turning the hardcore immersive experience into something social rather than something the game itself provides. Because the core gameplay loop, once it's fully understood, is just repetitive and pointless and limited. I mean, hell, I could go outside with my friends and start throwing rocks at cars, and that would be fun. So when the only fun part of Tarkov is the social part, it's really not saying much. I don't think it's possible to truly love Tarkov without also hating it a little. Not just because the game is difficult, although that is part of it. Not because of the patronizing skill issue that the rage baiters love to spout, but because of its lost potential. Tarkov has brilliant ideas, and it's manifested them in a lot of different ways. Incredible weapon systems, unmatched tension in firefights. But it also has structural problems that were baked into the game from the very beginning. And these problems, they can't just easily be patched away. The extraction shooter loop created something revolutionary, but it also created limitations that have shaped the game ever since. And after more than a decade of development, those limitations are still there, for a reason. I'll probably keep playing Tarkov from time to time. I still enjoy it. I especially like playing with friends and having a good time, having a good raid, getting out with a bunch of loot. There's still moments where the game captures something special, where it feels like, yeah, I'm in this cool hardcore shooter game. But I'm no longer waiting for Tarkov to become the game it was always promised to be. Instead, I think Tarkov's greatest legacy might be something else. I think it set the stage. It proved that players want these hardcore tactical shooters with real stakes. And someday another game will probably take those ideas, learn from Tarkov's mistakes, and finally deliver the experience that Tarkov has hinted at. A hardcore shooter that's actually fair and dynamic and rewarding. A game that respects the players while still demanding mastery. A game that unfortunately Tarkov has never become. If there's one thing that Tarkov does well, it's that it forces you to learn. And if there's one thing I've learned after playing Tarkov for years, it's that wanting Tarkov to be better doesn't make it better. So, it's probably unrealistic to expect Tarkov to rise above these gameplay limitations when they were laid directly into its foundation. That doesn't mean the game can't be enjoyed. It doesn't mean that it's a bad game even. I think it's just a game that was limited by its own concept. And I'm hopeful that one day we can get a realistic, immersive first-person shooter like Tarkov that delivers those heart-pounding, hand-shaking moments. But I hope that we can do it without a built-in gambling simulator, and I hope that we can do it with more transparency and creative systems that allow the game to really flourish and be engaging. And to accomplish that, I think developers will have to be creative. They'll have to think outside of that constrained extraction shooter box that limits Tarkov. A game where the story is told through fun gameplay and not through text boxes in between raids. A game with tasks that are fun and engaging, not ones that are repetitive and artificially difficult. A game that the fan base loves and enjoys coming back to, not a game that they hate and are somewhat addicted to. A game that I wish Tarkov was.